Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Wanted to talk a bit today about quote-unquote precious metals and how useful I believe they are for any sort of shit hits the fan situation. Be it short-term, long-term, mid-term. This video is going to be a response to the Modernsurvivalist, a guy named Fernando, who wrote a book based on his experiences in the Argentinian economic collapse. Presents a lot of common sense facts most of the time. I did take issue with his views on precious metals, however. And this may just be something which is more pertinent to me. It may not be relevant to you, depending on where you live and what the impending circumstances are. Some countries are more financially unstable than others. I have a couple questions. I have one question for Fernando if he watches this video. Is did he ever use silver or gold in the Argentinian economic collapse? That's question number one. And I probably will have another question towards the end of the video also. But I want to state my rationale for why I believe that the precious metals, personally for me, are certainly not up there on my, prepping priorities. Now, he did say something which I did agree with respect to, barter items and stuff like that. And it's that, take care of your basic needs first before you ever, start dabbling in the barter item thing. For me, if you plan on needing something, then you should be prepping that thing. You should be either stockpiling it or finding a way that you can have a renewable source of it. So I agree that, barter items should be priority per se, that prepping items should be priority. Now, he had an argument that, it's better to buy the best barter item possible is precious metals like gold, silver, what have you. And I completely disagree with this for my personal situation, and I think for many others, in that I would much rather have a commodity which perhaps doesn't depreciate in value, and even if it does, a commodity that will last forever, essentially, will last my lifetime at least, and not go bad, not spoil. There's plenty of foods and supplies that have that characteristic. Plenty of foods, plenty of supplies that have that characteristic. Everything from tools, different types of food that will store indefinitely, even ammunition, if stored properly, will store for a very long time, if stored properly. And all of those things, if you look at the price of rice, for instance, the price of rice varies. It all depends on inflation, mind you, but for the most part, it's not a depreciating thing. And rice can be stored forever if you store it properly. I can't remember if it was the Egyptian tombs that they found rice in that was still edible. So I mean, there's a lot of things that you can store for a long time, and I would much rather be able to either trade for items that people would want, rather than, try to, for one, the security factor, having to go out and barter in the first place is, I think, a security risk. And there's not a whole lot that you might need that you can't store in advance, other than, fresh produce and some other things of that nature. I mean, if you're well off enough to go beyond prepping and store barter items, you might as well just store more or the items you think that you will need. And I know that, you don't necessarily know what you're going to need. But in such case, I'm pretty sure that, and especially in a grid down scenario, like if you're talking about a situation in which currency is no longer an issue, then that has to be a serious grid down issue for it to warrant the use of silver and gold. And if it's that bad, I don't think that people are going to care too much for tokens. If the grid is down in such a way that people are that currency, that the financial system is no longer relevant, then I'm quite certain that food and various commodities are going to be far more sought than silver and gold and these coins, which really have no other value than what we collectively ascribe to them. So that's my main concern with it. And I think, we really need to, when we're talking about prepping and what survival is, we need to distinguish and make a clear definition of what we mean by prepping and survival. Because in the broadest sense, survival and prepping is just making good investments. And gold and silver really aren't good investments. I mean, they're good in the sense that they're going to hold their value. They're actually sort of, they've lost a bit of their value over the last few years. Gold anyways, I'm not sure about silver because I don't have any. And I haven't really been keeping tabs on it. But I know gold was peaking there for a while. And that whole gold market that's cornered by, there's all sorts of shady stuff that goes on with the gold market, and even how they get the gold in the first place is pretty sketchy, how they steal it from these third world countries and stuff like that. Not really going to get into that though, but a better investment would be, the best prep then would be real estate. And then you get into, well, is it really prepping because it's contingent on the financial system for it to hold its value? So I think, Fernando needs to make a clear distinction with what he's talking about with respect to survival. I know he typically tends to plan for the more pragmatic possibilities, like a shorter term economic instability, where you might still have some functions of civilization remaining, and with the expectation that they will come back. And that's what he primarily prepares for. He has rationale for that. I too think that, I've talked about varied rule of law and, the pandemic outcomes and stuff like that, which I think are the most plausible, which could cause global collapse. And I don't think that's a fantasy. I think that's a reality that's rooted in, just sort of induction based on what's happened in the past and the circumstances of today. A fantasy is more like thinking that, something like The Walking Dead is actually going to transpire. And zombies are just going to be walking around for years, even though, winter would surely freeze them. And the desert would surely dry them out, but they never tell you that in The Walking Dead. But, I totally disagree. I think, if you have the space, stockpile, if you're going to stockpile something, and you're going to call it prepping, and you're going to call it survival-based, then stockpile stuff. If you're talking about, preparing to be financially stable well into old age, yeah, invest in real estate. Invest in something that's not going to depreciate in value and which may actually grow and keep pace with inflation. That's another thing. Because of inflation, the stuff you buy today, because of the amount of debt, not many people really understand how the financial system works. This is how it works. People who, like the Federal Reserve, for instance, who pretty much print money, on the basis of the expectation that we'll pay it back. The first people to spend that money that goes in circulation, new fresh money, the product is the cheapest, because let's say, banker X prints $1 billion, and he goes and buys $1 billion worth of hard assets, and that money just came out of nowhere. It's not backed by any resource or any, has nothing, it's not representative of anything that's really real in the real world yet. So because he just infused that $1 billion into the economy, that means that the price of everything goes up. Let's say he goes and prints that $1 billion and he buys up a bunch of ammunition. Well, now the cost of ammunition has gone through the roof because there's less of it. And your money, your dollar that you had yesterday is only worth 95 cents today. So this idea that, the whole idea of depreciation and appreciation and stuff like that it's such a complicated issue into itself. To say that you couldn't store things which would hold their value is, I don't know, I disagree with that entirely. And even if you don't use that stuff that doesn't go bad, many people could use that stuff, and you could either, trade it or resell it or something like that. I mean, like I said, the idea that you're going to have a scenario in which everybody's walking around with bags of silver coins, trading with one another, and to think that with that scenario didn't come a whole other shitload of WROL, and you just can't have one without the other. You can't have a situation where people are using silver and gold and in need of stuff. And not in need of stuff, I should say. We're never going to go back to a gold, silver-based economy. There simply isn't enough of this stuff in existence. There isn't even a fraction of the gold and silver to back the currency what we have now. Not even a 0.001% of the actual cash that's out there. There's maybe a couple trillion in gold in the world and silver, compared to the global GDP, which is something in the neighborhood of $100 trillion. So that's my thoughts on that. Personally, I would recommend that people stockpile goods and skills, because skills are going to be a valuable commodity as they are now. Never mind gold and silver. People are going to be seeking those who know how to hunt, those who know how to grow food, those who can build and engineer things, people who can treat people medically. So take your silver and gold and go get educated. Or if you're concerned about, living well into old age, which in my books is not anything to do with survival and preparedness. I mean, it depends on your definition. Then by all means, take that silver and gold and get yourself a good investment portfolio going on. Anyways, that's all I have to say about this issue. So thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out. By all means, share your thoughts on this issue. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. Thank you.